Jai Hind viewers, we today bring to you another panel discussion on a very crucial topic, that is LCC based acquisition. Now, this is a complex topic, and we have got eminent panelists with us. We have with us Lieutenant General Dr. Anil Kapoor, who served as the Director General Electronics and Mechanical Engineers and Director General Infosystems, Indian Army. A chartered engineer, he was awarded the Eminent Engineer Award 2020 by Institution of Engineers. He is a professor of practice at IIT Tirupati and also a board member in their Innovation Hub. He writes and speaks on emerging technologies like C7, ISR, and AI in many publications and platforms. We also have with us Mr. Pradeep Gupta. He's a technocrat and an ex-bureaucrat. He left the Government of India to set up think tank security and policy initiatives to work for absorption of defense TOTs and improvement of border management. Besides, he is mentoring startups in AI, VR, and AR. He is the ex-OSD Indigenization MOD, ex-Joint Secretary MHA, ex-PS2 President, and ex-OSD and PS2 Defense Minister. We also have with us Commander Sonal Saxena, a naval aeronautical engineer with MTech, qualified on Russian turboprops, Chief Manager Aircraft Production in Naval Second and Third Line MRO, Fleet Program Manager at Aviation Headquarters, including overall contracts and drafting and execution. So I'll start by requesting each one of you with your initial thought on this complex subject. May I first request General Kapoor to give his views?
Thank you very much, sir. It's indeed a pleasure to be back on the panel discussing a very important issue on procurement, which is life cycle costing. Some days back, we talked of how L1 has come to be a very accepted system and a norm for want of anything better. And that time we discussed that LCC could be one of the options. And today we will deliberate on that. Looking at life cycle costing, I think it's very, very important for us as professionals to realize that today when we look at procurements, it is just not the initial cost that goes when we buy any equipment. I think we need to look at the next 20, 30, 40 years of engagement of this equipment, because it's a life cycle cost issue. As an example, equipment which cost X, by the time it comes to end of life, especially in the armed forces, you would have actually invested 4x onto it to keep it mission ready at all points in time through various maintenance and major interventions that we do, including overhauls. So what has been seen in the past is that normally you tend to buy equipment based on L1, and then you bleed, if I may use the word, in maintaining and sustaining it, because the costs become prohibitive, especially if it is an equipment export. The issue is, how do we tackle the life cycle concept issue? Now, just as some opening remarks, firstly, we need to relook at our complete procurement process. We need to rethink about the manufacturer recommended list of spares, because that becomes a substantial amount which is tagged onto the L1 costs. In some equipment, I'd like to mention that of the total cost of, say, 2,000 crores, almost 400 crores was MRLS. And then we got these specialized test equipment, specialized machine tools, technical documentation. All this becomes a huge cost center. Given the technology scenario today, I think we need to relook at this whole aspect a little differently. So how do we tackle a life cycle costing? The first is we bring in the system of accelerated user come reliability trials. And this could be done in the various terrains where we need to exploit it, and keep data as the reference point to see that once an equipment is exploited in surge, what fails. And if you have a handle over it, you would be able to assess your life cycle costs. The second is, we could ask the OEMs that if they were given an opportunity to maintain it through AMC, what would be their year-on-year cost post warranty? And that summation could well actually give us an idea of life cycle costing. And third, looking at the technology the way it is today, and a very important one at that, the digital twins. If we create a digital twin, I think a digital twin can help us to simulation and modeling to look at exploitation patterns and assess life cycle costs. So those are some opening remarks on how we could tackle life cycle costing as a future paradigm in procurement.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And this word future cost, these are the ones, looking into the future and looking at future costs is the complex part of this whole thing. Because, you have to, when you are looking at comparing systems, then the accuracy level needs to be high. So that is a challenge. We will come to that again later. Your initial thoughts, Mr. Pradeep Gupta, please.
Thank you, General Matharu. Thank you, General Kapoor, and I also good evening to you all, and Commander Sonal Saxena also. So I'll carry forward where General Kapoor had ended. He has very briefly summed up the key aspects of it. The life cycle cost we first time introduced as a concept way back in 2004-05. And since then, it has come a long way in the defense acquisition procedure. But nevertheless, it is still to be refined and honed. The defense I will just touch on the provisions of the defense acquisition procedure, wherein they have started with the life cycle support contract. What are the spares required? How far the vendor will give the support to the buyer, and wherein we have also mentioned that before he discontinues any spares, he'll give a notice of 2 years to us, so we can adequately stock those spares or develop some alternative to it. Besides, if he's modifying the design or something, he will give us a three-year notice. So in the life cycle cost, because life cycle cost is basically, as interpreted in the major platform like ship or the submarine or the aircraft or such things. Smaller weapons, yes, certainly missiles, etc., which have long life and life can be enhanced after servicing and upgrading. So the upgradation thing is also built in that the contract of defense acquisition procedure. So my issue is that how will we assess that the vendor is giving us the proper information? Here, I feel the MRO officers are the greatest asset to the procurement wing because they have been in thick and thin of that operating that instrument, equipment, or the weapon. Not exactly of that same kind, but maybe near to that. So that knowledge, we must try to put it on a paper and then try to assess. It is either built in the specifications of the RFP, or when the bidders give, they are the MRO officers of the armed forces, respective armed force, they are taken on board, and then they are asked whether the vendor has given, because say based on the life cycle cost, you select vendor A. But after 10 years, the estimates go awry because something has not been rightly assessed right in the beginning. So we definitely rely more on our own men, our own officers. So they must be the guide to tell us whether the vendor has rightly indicated the life cycle cost of the equipment, because basic equipment cost and the life cycle cost. This will make the total cost, because vendor obviously builds in the design, development, all these things are built in the basic cost of the equipment. But after you purchase, there are a lot of other costs also included: spare supply, upgradation, maintenance, training, and a lot of things. And even after, say, 15 years change in technology, interface in the complex aircrafts or the submarines or the ships. Because we have seen over the years that no aircraft is servicing less than 20-25 years. It is all more than this. And in this, the complete generation changes. So the aircraft has to be upgraded. That cost is also to be included in that. That is just in brief, I'm expressing my view. Over to Commander Saxena.
Yes, that's right. Commander Saxena, again, here some very interesting points have been brought. The similarity with earlier equipment, how to predict and how to make sure that your predictions are accurate. So these are obviously the challenges which Mr. Pradeep Gupta has brought out. What are your initial thoughts, Commander Saxena?
Sir, as part of the opening remarks, I'll convey life cycle costing. Some of the contracts that we have been already we have concluded in the three forces with Air Force as well as Navy. I have some naval experience in drafting the initial stages. So from that, what we came out with the life cycle costing again was a very complex topic, and as General Kapoor sir brought out the MRLS, the list of spares, which was given by the OEMs, has been very unreliable in most of the cases and has been a major part of the contractual cost, and had to be actually aged down quite a bit to come to a more fruitful cost of or more workable cost of the contract. Similarly, as Pradeep Gupta sir brought out the cost of the upgrades, now including it in life cycle costing, the cost of upgrades has been a major issue with most of the manufacturers. Coming back to the life cycle costing, sir, as brought out 2005 onwards, this concept has come in. In US, there is complete document on this that has been published, AAP 448. That has been published in 2013, which becomes a NATO guideline actually. Similarly, on similar lines, the DPP has been modified in 2015, 16, 17. There have been incorporations, as Pradeep Gupta sir brought out also, to factor for life cycle costing. I think in this discussion, it will be very fruitful to discuss those particular factors which we can incorporate and make the contract much more fruitful and more economical, most economical for the country.
Thank you, Commander Sonal. See, now so I would, if anybody can say, what is the main challenge which is there? Because this is so many things are there in this, but which is the main challenge which you visualize, and if you can give some sort of a method by virtue of what you know to guide people who are trying to do life cycle costing. Anyone?
Let me attempt this. In fact, one has been thinking about it quite a bit. And today we have a 2-bid system. You have the technical bid, and based on the technical tender document, you shortlist the vendors, and then you open their commercial bid. So these are the 2 stages. As we transcend into life cycle costing, I would recommend a 3-bid system. The first is the technical bid, the way it happens. The second is a life cycle sustenance support bid, which is given by each vendor. So every vendor who actually qualifies from the technical bid, we now open his life cycle sustenance support plan. What is his plan? After all, he would have done the whole reliability study, and while in the design stage, he has gone through a very formal design methodology when he's done his equipment. So we would exactly know what is the reliability of systems and subsystems he's planned, and what are the redundancies he's built into the system to build more reliability. What are the critical systems? What are the high cost systems? We do the ABC, FNS, and all those analysis which we know of, and we look at the complete iceberg. I mean, we all know that the initial cost of the equipment is just tip of the iceberg. So here we actually expose the whole iceberg. ab initio. That means the training cost, the cost of MRLS, the cost of upgrades, the cost of obsolescence and obsolescence management, the cost of spares as would obtain over the life cycle, including escalations. All this would need to be captured. So it's actually a mega data exercise on two parts. One is any simulation that he may have carried out, and any physical deployment examples that he or she can quote. And therefore, I think this would perhaps be the most important part of the deliberation, where we actually satisfy ourselves as buyers on the life cycle sustenance support. This today is a missing link. And this is where you need subject matter experts on reliability, data scientists who actually analyze the complete life cycle sustenance support. And then, based on the life cycle sustenance support, we now go in for the costs. And obviously, the cost bid has to be based on the life cycle support. So we see what is the correlation between what we discussed in the life cycle sustenance support leg of the procurement, and how does it well qualify in the bid, commercial bid that has been put by this vendor. And maybe we earlier talked of a QCBC, quality come cost based. We could actually look at quality come life cycle sustenance support come cost based model, wherein then we get a full handle over the problem correctly. And that perhaps could become one way of doing it. The other, to my mind, which I initially alluded to, was the digital twin. Today, I'm sure we could, some big OEMs, we can impress upon them to create digital twins, because these digital twins not only help us in doing a lot of predictive and prescriptive maintenance, and therefore help in product improvement with time, because that is the part of defect analysis and fault analysis. It also helps us in carrying out a very clear assessment of technology obsolescence and technology upgrades, which also becomes a major cost center. And when we look at this, we not only look at hardware, we look at software as well. And therefore, if all these are actually captured in the life cycle sustenance support document, which we have, when we finally go in for procurement, actually it could be a legal document which looks at the complete life cycle management of the equipment. So this is some thought which I'd like to put on the table for consideration and comments.
Yeah, before I come on to Commander Sonal, who has put some message here, Anil Kapoor, I wanted to just ask you, because this whole complex system is impacting so much on the cost and the expenditure as we look into the future. Do you think that because it is so complex in nature, the multiple type of engineering, data scientist type of roles are required to be able to get a handle on it? Do you think there is a need for a specialized organization or a specialized number of people who handle it? For example, do you think in our group there are people who can, like an MRO performance which is coming up, can we put together people who can advise on this with a lot of clarity? Anil Kapoor, please.
Sir, I totally agree with you. Today, a procurement cannot be, I mean, we do have committees, we do have boards, but are they rightly composed? I'm not sure. Are these guys who are really, very clear on the complete technologies? I'm not very sure. Do they have a full handle over data science and methodology of data science? I'm not very sure. Are they very good negotiators? Because on the other side, you have vendors who are very good negotiators. So really speaking, I think time has come when we need to have a very clearly laid out, should I say, structure, which only looks at procurements and contracts. And they are the subject matter experts. But suffice to say that procurement and contracts has to be an independent committee which comprises subject matter experts. They could get consultants, they could get advisors, they could get subject matter experts who are even veterans or otherwise, to come up with the best, should I say, negotiated contract from a life cycle perspective. There is definitely a need for this, for sure.
Thank you. And so now Commander Sonal, I'll just ask you something, then I'll come to Mr. Pradeep Gupta to look at his view on what is available. And, because he has a lot of knowledge about that. But what you have pointed out in your comments here, Commander Sonal, is that MRLS and upgrades maybe are the two areas which are the most crucial areas which you have to look at. And, the aspect of difficulty in deciding the parameters, and assigning the weightages. And because they are variable from case to case, as you say. So how do we get around this? I'm going to say that if you want to do life cycle costing, then you have to figure out a way of getting around these major issues. So your views on this from your experience, that is it at all possible, or is it something very difficult to do, and we'll have to wait for some higher technology to come in to help us? Commander Sonal?
Sir, thanks, sir. This MRLS and upgrades part that I mentioned, sir, this is, as Pradeep Gupta sir had told initially also, that the products that we are taking, we need to have a database for that. However, most of the defense procurements that happen, we want a cutting edge technology which may not, and most of the time does not have a database, such a database. Maybe the basic platforms in terms of aircraft or ships that we have started off standardizing, in that the database is getting generated now. However, the sensors and systems or weapon systems or tactical systems that are coming in, they are getting modified on day-to-day basis, sir. So for them, upgrade or a MRLS will not be workable. And that is where we'll have to include a performance-based parameter that will have to be incorporated into these systems. And that is where actually my intention is to bring in a component of performance-based logistics, which is separately listed into lifecycle costing as a separate component to give a much better framework for the contracts. That is one part of it, sir. Secondly, in the contracts, again, if it's an aircraft contract, the parameters for a lifecycle bid, as General Kapoor sir brought out, as suggested by him, the bid that we can include, or parameters that we include, the assessment parameters will be very different for a submarine, for a ship, for a tank, for a radar. All these equipment, it will be very, very different. And with the development, as I brought out earlier also, the parameters will keep changing. So some manufacturer, maybe from France, will offer a particular different system with much more different parameters. HAL or Indian bidders will offer a totally different technology itself. So the parameters in a contractual stage, we need to work out some standard norms which are not there anywhere in the DPP also, as I know. So these
Thank
are
you
my
very much,
two
Commander Sonal. That's you mentioned DPP and DA. So now, Mr. Pradeep Gupta, with you having heard all this, I'll slightly change the question. The challenges are there. Do you feel that in our existing documentation, are there methodologies available which will help us in meeting these challenging situations, and find a way of getting reasonably accurate LCC? Mr. Pradeep Gupta.
Thank you, General Matharu. I have opened the DAP before me. And if I go to the page number 182 in the technical offer para 34, what General Kapoor has rightly told just now, that it states in middle of the para that the range and depth of spare, the range and depth of spares included in the proposal should be supported by necessary reliability and prediction model, or authenticated by past data on the similar equipment in use. These will be evaluated during the FET. Any bidder found to be providing lesser ESP/MRLS in terms of range and depth will have to make good the deficiency at no extra cost, because it's a two-bid system they have already submitted. The revised list of MRLS to this effect is to be submitted prior to staff evaluation. So it brings out, but then this is all what is majorly stated. They have not gone into details of it, what Commander Sonal has just now mentioned, that the nitty-gritties have not been outlined in the document. So much is left to the officers who are expert in this. Again, I am coming to the same thing that the MRO officers are the, the functionalities in the armed forces, they are the most capable officers, I feel. And considering the group, enlightened group of which I'm also benefiting from them, their knowledge, this can be certainly be used to develop that that data and that pattern, and then compare what the vendor has stated. So this is one challenge is there. Secondly, what I was just thinking that we have to develop some sort of scale on which the different vendors can be compared. Because what Commander Sonal has rightly mentioned, that one vendor will quote in his own way, other vendor will quote in his own way. So there are differentiations. So how will you bring it to the same scale? We have to have some comparative system to wherein one vendor's recommendation and the other vendor's recommendation can be equally compared. And then we have to be very sure that the life cycle cost elements, what the vendor has quoted, are sufficient. This is the biggest challenge, and we have to challenge the vendor based on the information he has submitted for the life cycle cost, based on our experience of the similar equipment use. Now, almost all the major equipments we are using in the warfare, yes, the defense acquisition procedure has given some detail, but not much of it. So it has left to the technical group which is evaluating, and wherein some flexibility is given for the armed forces to put their representative as the member of the committee. So this is what I have to say.
Thank you for that. You have connected with the present documentation. General Kapoor, you wanted to say something?
Talking about MRLS in specific, this issue has been brainstormed quite a number of times, because this is perhaps the biggest bugbear. The fact is that in our country, we've got deserts on one side and mountains on the other. And the equipment is exploited sometimes in deserts and sometimes in mountains. And the terrain and the weather conditions and the climatic conditions there actually dictate how the system failures will get defined with time. So really speaking, it is quite a challenge in our environment. And therefore, what I recommend is that in some contracts, I am aware that especially in the medical, they take 5 years warranty. I think we need to rethink on our parameters of warranty and how do we manage the whole issue. It needs a big paradigm change and a shift from our present thinking of 2 years. 2 years is too short a time. And I feel that we need to have at least 4 to 5 years of warranty, where the vendor brings spares that will be required. We train our officers and men on the equipment to become subject matter experts. They manage the show at the front end. The back end support, including spares, is provided by the OEM. I think in these 5 years, if we were to carry out at least 5 exercises in the terrains where it would get exploited, we would have enough data available for us to crystal gaze correctly what our MRLS should read. So in this warranty period is what we should generate the MRLS, and then we would also get to see how product improvement is required, what are the defect reports that are getting generated because of various faults which are occurring as recurring faults, and where all design changes. So actually, these 5 years is a good time to crystal gaze at the behavior of the equipment and the health pattern of the equipment in various terrains where it is exploited. And then in these 5 years, we crystallize our MRLS, we crystallize all these parameters, and therefore MRLS we can actually de-link from the original procurement to a subsequent procurement, which is carried out based on our experience, give it a rethought. Rethought in two ways. One is what is ex-import. We have one model, and what is indigenous or make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have another model. So I think the DAP 2020 will need to be relooked at if we have to look at life cycle costing, and if we have to look at each of these parameters, whether it is MRLS, whether it is upgrades, and whether it is exploitation, design and defect analysis, and all those things. So actually, it's a big challenge. More so because the technology today is on a rapid rate of changing itself. Disruption is the norm, and therefore we have to come up with an agile way of doing procurement and planning MRLS and planning other requisites for sustenance support over the life cycle.
Thank you very much, Anil Kapoor. So the challenges are there, but from this discussion, what seems to be coming out is that there are some, sort of solutions which are appearing. So one is that obviously because even the MRO officers who can contribute by virtue of the knowledge, as in the messages Commander Sonal just brought out, they have to, postings are there, they have to be rotated. So certain SMEs, if we can develop, who are, like Anil Kapoor said, negotiators, and who are having multiple discipline knowledge, right from reliability engineering up to data science and many other things, use of technology. If they can be built, that is one. The aspect of warranty, extended warranty, that comes in to some extent. Then the aspect of software upgrades, that has to be tied down in advance as a percentage of the initial cost in some manner, so that that doesn't hold you back. But such like things can be worked out. But another thing which is there is how much, I don't know, we can use it in the land forces, but is performance-based logistics. Because if you are able to somehow bring that in, it will sort of give a ballpark figure of the life cycle. And now your holding of MRLS gets, also curtailed. So how can we, some out-of-the-box things like the new technology coming in terms of information systems and in terms of capacity of drones to move things from one place to another, how much can PBL come in to tie down life cycle cost more practically? Anyone?
What I feel that what you have just now told, and Anil Kapoor has mentioned, and Commander Sonal also, that it's a big challenge. The challenge, what I can, in one word I can say, is that uncertainties. We have to be prepared for uncertainties because whatever you see on the piece of paper while you are accepting the bid or deciding the weapon system, you know very well before you, even 20 years after these spares will be required. But then say if these spares are not required, it is redundant, or maybe something else is required, or more number of spares are required. This is the uncertainty. We must be prepared for it. And here, what all the eminent speakers have just now told is the data. So we have to build data right now. And in the MRO, we keep on generating a lot of data. Then a model can be created, and we can use the statistical tools to at least verify, or at least be assured that yes, in probabilistic term, are 80% okay with this decision, or 70% okay with this decision, if not 100% or 90%. So we know beforehand. So in that statistical tool, because then the models have to be created, we have to put data analyst also, as well as the statistician, to build churn out the formulas, and then decide that what is the probability of uncertainty in this particular equipment, what is in that equipment. So these mathematical tool or statistical tool have to be employed in such complex platform like huge ship or submarine or the aircraft with costing us billions of dollars. Because it is not for one time buy, it is over the period of 3-4 decades it will last if there is not a war. So that's what is one thing. Secondly, we have to find ways to hedge that uncertainty right in the beginning. So that also we can think of in the DAP itself, that uncertainty has to be captured, and then how will we hedge for that? Maybe in future procurements, or maybe some extra budget or something like that, we have to decide. I'm just giving food for thought to this eminent group today. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you. In fact, we have got General Alok Dev who joined us as a participant. So, General Alok Dev, sir, kindly say what you have to say.
Thank you, General Matharu. I joined late, but I just, when I joined, the point about the challenges to working out the life cycle requirements because of the operational imperatives of deploying equipment in various types of terrain, that was the point under discussion. And it just came to mind that, yes, it is a big challenge, but has this point ever made it to the discussions at the level of India, US? Because you have F-16s flying out in Iraq in the deserts, you have them flying over the South China Sea, and you have them flying over Europe. So, I mean, there are other countries also doing this. So they have a plethora of data because they digitized decades before us. So has these points ever been raised, or have we got anywhere on this? Because there's no harm in taking help of people as to see how they're managing these things and coming to conclusions. Of course, our equipment is different and we will work out our own algorithms. But has this point ever come up in some discussion for us at level beyond India?
While it's a good thought to discuss with them, moment you discuss these things with them, they take if I may say, the better part of the discussion to their business advantage, because at the end of the day, they are looking at their ROIs. So I would rather say that we need to home grow a solution in this, which is to our advantage, and without giving that advantage to the vendor. And that's why when we were discussing, perhaps you had not joined in by then, sir, we were talking about our own professionals, subject matter experts, to form a committee for procurement and negotiation and look at our own unique model, because perhaps we are the only country which is 24/7, 365 into operations. I don't think there's any other country in the world or there's any other equipment which is exploited as it is exploited in our subcontinent of India. And therefore, we are the best testing ground. We are also the best people to give them the advice rather than take advice from them. The only thing is, we need to reform the way we do business. We need to get closer to technology, closer to data management, closer to data science. And I think we will make them eat out of our hands. And that is doable. Now,
Thank you, General Kapoor. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Just to take it forward, point about a vendor taking it to his advantage is understood and well taken. Therefore, for us to generate such quantities of data, the thought, where has this, to what extent has this thought percolated downwards to a user, to Battalion A, Regiment B, Regiment C, and how do we plan to do it? I mean, ultimately, how do we plan to move this to the grassroots? Because point about doing it in-house is valid. But then isko aage kaise badhana hai? How do we get people to understand the importance of this? Because people are generally running to stay in the same place. So how do we get this? How do we prioritize this at the user level? Ultimately, that's what we'll have to do. Maybe it will be a format which the EME will work out, somebody will work out with a great deal of thought. But people have to understand it and then get about it. So,
yes, sir, I'll respond by saying that as was discussed earlier in the discussion, the complexity of assessing the life cycle parameters is such that you need sort of multiple heads to come together, from the user right to the data scientist, to the engineer, to the person who has experience, who has got knowledge about external systems. Everything has to come together into and negotiators, everybody. All this has to come together in some sort of a formalized manner. and then only we may be able to, address issues like what you are raising as to what instructions to be passed down the hierarchy, so that the granularly that data can be collected. That's the best we can offer at this point, sir. But maybe certainly we will. Yeah, General Kapoor wants to say something, and also Mr. Pradeep Gupta. So, Mr. Pradeep Gupta will go with you, then with General Kapoor. Mr. Pradeep Gupta, please go ahead.
Very rightly, it was mentioned that yes, we have to do some assessment of the requirement that yes, this is the spare list required. What has been my experience in certain negotiations of the Ministry of Defense is that vendors are dictating in the sense that we are at the receiving end, because they propose the equipment, they propose the quotation, they propose the setup, everything. And we have our own system when we have checklist, yes, you have given this, you have not given this. But beyond that, in the complex system, because the way we evaluate the tenders, we compare and then decide on the technical bids. And then based on that, the technical bid is qualified for the price bid. So in that manner, the vendor who is quoting it, he is at the sending end and we are at the receiving end. So something has to be done, or in the entire negotiation process also, what was rightly mentioned in the beginning, that they have good negotiators, but it is maybe because they are in the firm footing at that sending end, and we are more of the at the receiving end. That is one part. Secondly, if we are not very alert, I've seen the technology negotiations, and vendors will always like to keep some certain key things with them. So if you probe deeply into know-how, know-why, etc., they don't allow you to get into that turf at all. So this is one with the risky area to enter into the discussions with them. But nevertheless, the best solution is that you make your own, design your own weapon. That is the ultimate thing of it. But since that situation is very far-sighted and it may not happen in near a few decades also, we have to keep on negotiating with the vendors across from abroad, and then sit and decide. So we must not, only thing we must see that we don't land in trap. The ultimate is that today the tax is less, but in the running cost is 4x, 5x, what was rightly mentioned in the beginning. So this is what I feel that is one issue.
Thank you, Mr. Pradeep Gupta. General Kapoor, you wanted to say something?
Sir, I wanted to say that since we are into an ideation mode here, I mean, the aim is only to share some thoughts and ideation. But the fact is that there are a lot of value adds we can do to our existing system if we are willing to change. The first thing is that we should be accepting the will to change. Now, what Mr. Pradeep Gupta just mentioned, that the OEMs normally are on a higher pedestal because they perhaps know everything about the equipment. But the fact is, when you carried out the user trials, when you carried out the MET, actually the baton has come into your hands, because you have now exploited not only equipment of one OEM, you have exploited equipment of X number of OEM, and you've eliminated Y out of it. And now for these X minus Y, you are totally in control of knowing the defect patterns, of knowing the reliability, of knowing the performance and everything. But that said, we talked about performance-based logistics. Now, since Make in India and Atmanirbhar is the flavor of the day, I think we need to rethink when it is MII, Make in India. And today, quite a few major pieces of equipment are actually Make in India, whether it is Army, Navy, or Air Force, all three we are aware. It is a buzz, the industry is a buzz, and I think we need to now look at Atmanirbhar Bharat acquisition procedure. How do we acquire this? Do we really need MRLS? And I want to allude on the performance-based logistics. If I'm taking a equipment from Bharat Electronics Limited, why should I take a MRLS at all? Why can't I just take my war pack or whatever is fast moving, which I may need for my routine maintenance, and for the balance, make Bell responsible for performance-based logistic support? And that could be, should I say, uh, a legal document that we sign on assured performance-based logistics over the life cycle. After all, he's my OEM. Why should I fill my stores all over the country with his spares? Why can't he open his regional depots and uh, get into the push model? Why should we look at it? So therefore, I feel when we are looking at PBL, we need to create a performance-based logistic model for Indian companies, and those who are abroad, we need to create a similar assured model from them that they do tie up as a part of their uh, contract with an Indian vendor or Indian OEM who actually becomes the single window for performance-based logistic support. We should reduce our logistic footprint to barest minimum that will we require. And of course, it's like exactly like what we do in FOL. There's a minimum stock level that we hold, and there's continued guarantee reserve, which is assured by the Indian oil companies. On a similar model, we need to look at performance-based logistics. We hold our minimum reserve stock that we feel is critical for our sustenance support, and the balance is held by the OEM as a continued guaranteed reserve. That may give us a better dividend out of performance-based logistics that we are talking about.
Thank you, General Kapoor. Now, I think with that, I will come to the last part of this particular panel discussion. I'll now request one by one the panelists to give their closing remarks and give their main point which they feel out of everything which they've heard, which can help in moving forward towards this LCC concept. First, I'll request Commander Sonal, then Mr. Pradeep Gupta, and finally General Kapoor. Commander Sonal, please.
Sir, I think the relevant points have been spoken during the discussion, and as per my experience on MRLS and upgrades, again, the total cost of operations, that is major part of the life cycle costing and analysis. These things have to be factored. Secondly, another aspect in other countries, the life cycle costing as such has been now included as a assessment parameter and not a parameter for deciding L1 per se. To give incentives to the vendors for a better life cycle support, there is something enhanced performance parameters that has also come in, wherein EPPs, based on their life cycle commitments, support commitments, they are given some concessions in their bids, or in deciding them as L1, they are given some additional points. So that is how the life cycle costing has come up. It is not that on the basis of life cycle costing they are decided as L1. So that one thing again that we need to adapt. It is, in my opinion, a very recommended thing. And secondly, as we dwelled into performance-based logistics, the first few years, at least, definitely we should look at performance-based logistics by when we have generated adequate database, because the vendor does not share a database at the trial stage, as General Kapoor sir mentioned. But in those first 5 years, when we have performance-based logistics post-contractual stage, we are closely monitoring and using that equipment. So that is when a reliable database can be generated. The last one that the point that I want to submit is, as I mentioned in a message also, within the services, such an expert concerted pool is not available, and it's not due to various service exigencies. It's not possible also to get such a pool. But however, statistical experts, database generation, failure analysis, these kind of, we can keep doing some courses and all in between the services. But this is a talent that has to be developed. This is a skill that has to be developed. And especially officers who have held such appointments and have experience on this, especially at retirement stage as part of advisory boards. These officers can be utilized to develop into such talents. They can be a consultant firm, which again, a consultant firm will have to be chosen as L1. Again, that's a separate bidding process. But a government based advisory boards, which will pay certain part of as an honorarium to those consulting officers, and whatever benefits are brought out from the contract, some tangible bonuses or incentives from that can be given. And such a pool can be developed from all three services, and even DRDO and HAL also can be utilized in them, wherein a lot of technical and operational pool is available. So that's my remarks, sir.
Thank you very much. Commander Sonal, Mr. Pradeep Gupta.
Yeah, carrying forward
remarks.
from what very brilliant statement by Commander Sonal has made, I just carry forward what we have been discussing in a very broad manner. In the DAP, it is given. Again, I'm repeating that the range and depth of spares included in the proposal should be supported by necessary reliability and prediction model or authenticated by the past data on similar equipment in use. So very broadly, they have stated. Now it is up to the user, the force or the agency to how to go about it while doing the technical evaluation. And what Commander Sonal has very rightly pointed out, that we must have the team of statisticians or the armed forces officers trained as statistician. Navy has got wonderful officers who are doing good study in statistical institute, and but then they are not in this field, some other field they are doing. So this can, because we have to embrace technology, we have to embrace newer mathematical tools, etc., to refine our approach to these things. And the essence of the DAP is very clearly given, but certainly DAP has not gone beyond that. They have left it to the user agencies or the indenting agencies to devise ways for that. So the armed forces must immediately start doing. But yes, when the L1 is mentioned, certainly the life cycle cost, which is included as the MRLS, etc., upgrade, because he's asked, vendor is asked to incorporate those cost of upgrade, etc., in the bid itself. So it is captured. So whether that is correct or not, it has to be evaluated. So more or less the essence is given in the DAP, but then nitty-gritties are not given. So that is the open field for us. And MRO officers are the, I think, one treasure trove of information they have about the equipments. Not exactly, but some similar equipment that can be captured and at least start working on models for that. This is what I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pradeep Gupta. General Kapoor, your final closing remarks on this?
Thank you, sir. I think it's been a very lively and interesting discussion. My top 5 points. Firstly, when we look at life cycle costing, I think we need to start embracing digital twins. And we must urge our OEMs to get into digital twins and modeling and simulation technologies for getting the best out of their equipment, both for their advantage and for us. And that will be a win-win when we look at a life cycle costing. My second point is that we need to reframe our 2-bid system into a 3-bid system, whereas second bid is actually the life cycle sustenance support, which is very important, and therefore all our user and MET trial guys will actually create the necessary vibration and the necessary impact for getting life cycle costing, a handle over the life cycle costing when we look at the complete procurement. Therefore, it will be the quality leg, which is the technical bit, the life cycle leg, and then the cost leg. The third is that when we look at performance-based logistics, we need to extend our warranty beyond 2 years to maybe 4 or 5 years. That can be worked out. And we look at an assured performance-based logistics along with OEM, where our inventory holding and carrying costs can go down to something that we need, which we call the minimum stock levels for criticalities, meeting criticalities, and the continued guaranteed reserve should be provided by the OEM. That may be a better model to get the best bang out of the buck and reduce our own liabilities of carrying dead inventories. The fourth is that we need to have cerebrally vibrant data scientists, even if we have to, whether we train them or we get them through any of the models, including a TA model or contractual model. We need them to do risk modeling. We need them to do failure mode analysis. We need to do them to do all the data analytics, which will help us in getting a better visibility over life cycle sustenance support. And we need hardcore negotiators, whether we train them or we get them, to make sure that we negotiate well when we look at a LCC model. Because when we look at a LCC model, actually we're looking at the next 40 years or next 50 years. And therefore we need to be very sure where we are, what we are stepping on. And that will be a mandated change that will be required in our structures. And the last is, fifth point is, since we all veterans here, I think we need to exploit veterans the way we are talking here. I think we can add a lot of value as subject matter experts, and therefore we could well be consultants, because we can do a whole-time job, whereas those who are serving have a time penalty because they have to do 30 things, and this is one of them. This may be the only thing that a veteran may do, and given his experience, he'll do a good job. So I think these are some of the thoughts that we can ring in to bring life cycle costing as a reality in all future procurements. Thank you.
Thank you, General Kapoor. In fact, I think, as we say in MRO Digest, value through discourse. So, with so much of experience, so much of knowledge, when we come together and we grapple with the topic, even as complex as LCC, some cogent thoughts start emerging, as is evident in today's discussion. And now it remains for me to thank General Kapoor, Mr. Pradeep Gupta, Commander Sonal Saxena as our panelist, and special thanks to General Alok Dev for coming in and giving us a different perspective and adding to the value of the discussion. So with that, viewers, we come to an end of another episode of our panel discussions. We look forward to having you with us in the future panel discussions also. The links to the profiles of our panelists are available in the show notes below, and you are welcome to contact them for any further guidance or any further exchange you may like to have. With that, we close this panel discussion. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.